A man walks into a room. Not a young man. 60, maybe 65. Silver at the temples, jacket that fits like it was cut for him. No hurry in his step. And before he opens his mouth, the room adjusts. Voices drop half a register. Someone straightens a collar. The loud guy at the bar stops mid-sentence. You've seen it happen and you couldn't explain it if I paid you. I'm Frank, and today we're pulling apart the specific psychology behind a certain kind of man. The gay boomer and Gen X guy who walks in and gets respect before he said a word. What you're watching is a toolkit at work. Charisma is part of it. Money sometimes helps. But underneath both, there's a set of skills built under pressure most people never had to touch. And it reads, in a room, as authority. Here's the thing you probably haven't considered. The men we're talking about grew up as a much more hidden minority than anyone under 40 can picture. Gallup's numbers put the share of baby boomers who identify as LGBT at around 2%. For Gen Z, that number's closer to 20. So when a gay man born in 1955 was figuring out who he was doing it in a world where almost no one around him was visibly like him. No representation, no language, no safe room to practice being himself in. He had to learn to survive a room before he learned to enjoy one. That's where the toolkit starts. Researchers have a name for the first piece. It's called crisis competence. A psychologist named Douglas Kimmel put the idea forward back in 1978, and it's held up in the literature ever since. The theory is straightforward. When a young person has to go through the coming out process in a hostile environment, meaning they have to manage secrecy, weigh danger, calculate who to tell, rehearse what to say, handle rejection when it comes, they build a set of coping muscles. Those muscles don't go away. They sit there, ready. And later in life, when a real crisis hits, a job loss, a diagnosis, a death, a divorce, the guy who already survived a private war at 15 doesn't panic the way other people do. He's been here. He knows the shape of it. A 2012 study in the American Journal of Public Health looked at stress and mental health in midlife and older gay-identified men, and the pattern shows up clean. Self-reliance and a sense of mastery, the feeling that you can handle what life throws at you. Those are the buffers. They developed early, in circumstances that were rough, and they paid dividends decades later. A 2025 study in Research on Aging, with a large sample of middle-aged and older gay and bisexual men, found something even more direct. The older the man in the sample, the less negative self-image he carried, and the more resilience he reported. Age was doing the opposite of what people assume it does. It was making these men stronger, not more fragile. A separate study of older sexual minority U.S. veterans, published in the Annals of Epidemiology, found the same shape. Older age, better coping. Consistent with crisis competence. So when that man walks into the room, part of what you're picking up on is a nervous system that's already been through the fire and figured out where the exits are. He's calm because scanning has become a habit, and habits become invisible after 50 years. What you read as command presence is a man who long ago stopped being afraid of the small stuff, because the small stuff isn't what almost broke him. Now let's talk about the voice. There's a whole body of work on something called code switching, and gay men have been running an advanced version of it their entire adult lives. There's a Psychology Today piece by a licensed therapist named Chris Tompkins that goes right at this. He talks about vocal code switching, the way a gay man will adjust his pitch, his cadence, his word choice, depending on who's in front of him. Tompkins calls it the insurance voice, the voice you put on when you need to be taken seriously, or when you need to not be spotted, or when a cab driver is looking at you in the mirror and you're doing math about whether to give him your real address. There's another write-up from a practice called Boy Meets Therapy that breaks down the same behavior as identity management and risk navigation. And here's the part people miss. Doing that over and over for decades is exhausting. It costs you something. It's cognitive labor. It's emotional labor. It also, quietly, builds a skill almost no one else has. You get very good at reading what's in front of you. Very good at hearing what a room wants before the room knows it wants it. Very good at delivering a sentence at exactly the right volume, at exactly the right pitch, with exactly the right amount of warmth or steel to land the way you need it to land. That's a professional skill. Executives pay coaches thousands of dollars to learn a diluted version of it. These men have been running the graduate program since they were 12. It's still relevant now, by the way. There's LinkedIn data reported through BuzzFeed in 2024 showing that around 75% of LGBTQ+ professionals still feel pressure to code switch at work. Even with an ally nearby, most of the time, the switch is still on. So the older guy standing at the head of the conference table, calmly rerouting the meeting with 2 sentences and a pause, he's been rehearsing that move in one form or another since junior high. The people across from him are meeting a finished product. They're meeting the 1,000th performance of a role he's had a lifetime to refine. You feel that in your chest before you can name it. That's the respect. Let's keep going, because there's a third piece, and it's the one that ties everything together. Chosen family. There's a study from 2004 by Shippey, Cantor, and Brennan, over 200 gay men in New York City between the ages of 50 and 87. It looked at who these men actually rely on. The stereotype, the one you've been fed by every sad movie about aging gay men, is that they die alone in an apartment with the TV on. The data says something else. On average, these men had support networks built around roughly 5 chosen family members. Friends, ex-partners still in the fold, younger people they'd mentored, a neighbor who became a brother. The network was about the same size as a straight man's. What changed was the architecture. It was built, not inherited. Building something is different from inheriting it. When you inherit a family, you don't have to know how it works. It just is. When you build one, you have to understand every screw and every hinge. You have to know how to recruit people, how to keep them, how to handle a fight without losing them forever, how to hold a funeral for one of them and still show up to work Monday, how to fold a new person in without threatening the ones who were there first. A 2025 study in the Journals of Gerontology, Series B, Perron and colleagues, looked at multi-generational LGBTQ+ chosen families and applied the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu's framework to what they saw. They found chosen families transferring 4 kinds of capital across generations: economic, social, cultural, and symbolic. Money, contacts, know-how, and reputation. All of it moving hand to hand, without a will, without a lawyer, without a bloodline. These older men learned to build institutions with no institutional backing. They learned to move resources through a network they designed themselves. You know what that produces? A guy who understands power. The kind that comes from knowing exactly who owes what to whom, and why, and for how long, rather than the kind that comes from a title on a door. When he walks into a room, he's already sizing up the invisible economy of it. Who's actually running this meeting? Who's pretending to? Who's about to be useful? Who's about to be a problem? Call it fluency. He's been reading these rooms his whole life. Yours is nothing new. There's a cohort story sitting underneath this too, and it deserves to be said carefully. A 2024 paper in Frontiers in Sociology laid out something researchers already knew, but hadn't always framed this way. The baby boom generation of gay men, men born between 1946 and 1964, was the cohort hit hardest by the AIDS crisis. In their own losses, and in what they watched happen around them. Entire circles gone in a few years. Boyfriends, best friends, whole address books. I'm not going to dwell there because that's not the video. But you can't understand the calm in these men without acknowledging that a lot of them learned, before they were 40, how to organize a memorial, negotiate with a hospital, handle an estate that the legal system didn't want to recognize, and go back to work on Monday. Grief logistics at an age when most people are still learning to file their taxes. If you ever wondered why a certain kind of older, gay man seems unshockable, why nothing you bring to him seems to rattle him, that's a piece of the answer. He learned early that life will take from you, and that you still have to make dinner. Alright, let's zoom in on the actual behavior, because this is what you notice in the room. Watch how he shakes a hand. It's firm, quick, and his eyes stay on your face for exactly the right beat. Not too long, not too short. That comes from decades of learning that a handshake was often the first, and sometimes only, chance to establish that he belonged in the room. Watch how he handles an interruption. Someone talks over him, and he doesn't fluster, and he doesn't fight for the floor. He waits. He lets the interrupter finish, gives it a beat of silence, and then continues from exactly where he was, in the exact same tone, as if the interruption never happened. That silence is a weapon. He learned it a long time ago. It says, "I have all the time in the world and none of yours," and it works every time. Watch how he handles a compliment. He accepts it. Clean. He doesn't deflect. He doesn't perform modesty. He doesn't crack a joke to shrink it. He says thank you and moves the conversation forward. That's a skill too. A lot of people in that room have never learned to just receive. Watch how he handles a young person. He doesn't talk down. He asks questions and listens to the answers like he actually wants to know. Part of that is the mentorship reflex. The chosen family research shows these men have spent years passing knowledge sideways and downward through networks they built themselves. Mentorship isn't a program to him, it's a habit. Watch what he wears. Nothing screams, everything fits. He learned a long time ago that visibility was a variable he had to control, and that lesson didn't go away when the world got safer. It just turned into taste. Now let's talk about what all this does to a room. Human beings pick up on regulation before they pick up on anything else. If your nervous system is calm, and mine is a little jangled, mine will start to match yours within a couple of minutes of being near you. It's involuntary. So the man who walks in already regulated, already unafraid, already fluent, already unbothered, becomes the anchor. Everyone else's system starts to sync to his. That's what you're feeling when you say someone commands a room. You're being calmed. And your brain reads calm, in that context, as authority. He didn't have to do anything. He just had to be the steadiest signal in there. And he's been the steadiest signal in the room since he was old enough to know his own life depended on it. There's a piece of this worth naming, because I don't want to leave it out. Not every older gay man carries this presence. The research shows tendencies, not guarantees. Some men were crushed by what they lived through. Some are still carrying wounds that never got tended to. The literature on resilience in this cohort is real, but it lives alongside a parallel literature on the mental health toll of a lifetime of stigma. Both are true at the same time. What we're describing today is the specific presentation, the men who came through it and turned the pressure into a skill set. Because that's the one you're asking about when you notice a room go quiet. And there are a lot of them. SAGE, the National Resource Center on LGBTQ+ Aging, estimates that by 2030 there will be around 7 million LGBTQ+ Americans over the age of 50. 7 million. A whole population walking around with a version of this toolkit, in varying shapes and doses. You've met one. You'll meet more. So when you're standing across from one of these men, and you find yourself standing up a little straighter without deciding to, here's what's happening. You're reading the finished product of a life that ran on hard mode. You're reading crisis competence, banked over decades. You're reading a voice that was tuned in 100 different rooms until it became an instrument. You're reading a network built by hand, with no template, that taught him how power actually moves through people. You're reading a nervous system that learned early not to flinch and never unlearned it. The thing that reads as respect is compression. 50, 60 years of adaptive skill compressed into how he stands, how he waits, how he speaks, how he doesn't. What looks effortless is the opposite. It's the effort finally paid off. Here's the last thing, and then we're done. The interesting question is, what happens to that toolkit when the world around them keeps changing? Younger generations don't need the closet the way this cohort did. The insurance voice is optional in more places than it used to be. The chosen family is still there, but it lives next to families of origin that are, increasingly, actually showing up. So the exact conditions that forged this presence are, thankfully, softening. Which means the man who walks into that room and quiets it, that specific version of him is, in a way, a historical artifact. He's not gone. He's not going anywhere soon. But he's specific to a cohort that had to build itself from scratch because no one was going to build it for them. Watch them while they're here. There's something to learn just from standing near one. Actually, hold on. I said we were done and then I kept talking, which is exactly the kind of thing one of these men would clock immediately. So let me actually earn the extra couple of minutes. Because there's a piece I skipped, and it's the one that ties the behavior to something you can use. Think about what it takes to be underestimated for a long time and not get bitter about it. That's the other thing you feel when one of these men walks in. There's no chip on the shoulder. There's no "I'll show you" energy. He already showed them. 40 years ago. Nobody noticed and he kept going anyway. What you're standing across from is a man who stopped needing external confirmation somewhere around 1992 and never went back. That's rare. Most people spend their whole lives auditioning for a room. He stopped auditioning before you were out of grade school. Here's where it gets useful for you, whoever you are, watching this. You don't have to have lived his life to borrow the posture. The posture is learnable. Slower speech, longer pauses, eye contact that doesn't flinch and doesn't drill, a handshake that ends when you decide it ends, a compliment received cleanly, an interruption absorbed and ignored. None of that requires a backstory. It just requires you to decide that the room doesn't get to set your tempo. The men we've been talking about learned that under duress. You can learn it on purpose. That's the gift of watching someone who's already done the work. You get to see the finished shape of it and reverse engineer the parts that fit your life. One more thing worth saying. The research on chosen family, the Perron study, the older Shippey work, points at something the rest of us keep getting wrong. A support network is something you build, on purpose, over years, by paying attention to who shows up and who doesn't, and adjusting accordingly. These men have been running that experiment for decades. The result is a small, tight, durable circle that actually functions. Most people never build that because they assume the family they were born into will cover it. Sometimes it does, often it doesn't. And by the time you notice, you're 60 and the bench is thin. So watch the man in the room. Watch how he greets 3 specific people before he greets anyone else. Watch who he checks on before he sits down. That's the network, live, in front of you. That's 40 years of maintenance, showing its work in about 90 seconds. All right, that's the whole thing. There's a video on the screen. Go watch that one next.